Hello, my name is Kirioth, and today we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about the introduction of beta rules for the Forgeworld stuff for the Adeptus Custodes, and we're going to talk about Games Workshop stepping up and doing a charitable thingy, which normally we probably wouldn't talk about because a company giving money to charity should just be something that happens anyway, but this is an interesting story and shows another side to Games Workshop, which seems to be a kind of, how do I put this, a passive-aggressive crackdown on win-at-any-cost players in tournaments. So, we'll start out with the Adeptus Custodes rules. Now, I'm excited by this, but not just because it means there are now rules for the Adeptus Custodes. I'm also excited for this because it shows a distinct shift in terms of how Forgeworld and Games Workshop are thinking about this stuff. So, at the moment, the rules don't look that great. They are beta rules, they are available for download. What's interesting about this is the fact that they are asking for direct feedback. Now, I think they'll get a lot of feedback because having taken a look at them myself and asked a couple of people, the first thing I thought was that it seems overcosted. Most of the stuff seems overcosted for what it does. There's some weird decisions in there that I don't really understand. Weapons that don't seem quite in sync with the overall army of the Custodes in terms of how much damage they deal versus points cost. The Contemptor Aculus just seems worse than a standard Contemptor, but for more points. Only just does less damage, which is weird. I don't really understand it. But the good thing about this is that they are actually saying, go out, play games, take these rules with you, take your models with you, stick them on the tabletop for Warhammer 40k, play some games with them, then email us, come back to us and say, hey, this is what I've found, this is how this performs in comparison to this. They're not just providing beta rules, they're not just providing rules that aren't even finished for people to test, they are actively seeking feedback so that they can tweak these rules when they are finally released in their kind of finished state. That's kind of a big deal. I've seen a lot of people focusing on the fact that the units maybe need tweaking, like the points cost needs tweaking, or their stats need tweaking, and that's fine because that's the point of what they're doing. But there's a surprising lack of discussion about how much of a departure this is. This isn't just like the community survey thing where it's like, oh, what do you want to see? They're actually asking a wider range of people to test their rule set before they implement it. Now, at the moment, it's just for the Custodes, but that has a really interesting kind of connotation to it where we could actually see this happen more often. We could actually find that finally the 40k player base gets to do essentially what video game companies do. I mean, admittedly, when video game companies say beta these days, it's quite often code for glorified demo, but there are plenty of games out there where they will do a closed beta or a closed alpha, or they will open it up to do stress tests, so on and so forth. Actually having that move into 40k, where you can get a larger sample range, where you can actually get feedback from players, that's really promising, and it shows a distinct shift from the Games Workshop of old. Like a very distinct shift. I mean, I know we're in new Games Workshop now. Things are most definitely improved in pretty much every single way. But this is like another step again. I think it's a really good sign that Games Workshop is actually increasingly aware of how valuable their user base is, of how valuable their player base is. And if they're willing to actually approach the players and say, we want your help in balancing this, we want your help in making this work, it's something that should absolutely be supported. Now, at the moment, there are only rules for the Caladius Grav Tank, the Corona's Grav Carrier, the Contemptor Aculus Dreadnought, which I can't say, and the Contemptor Exemplar. But that's just the start. It's just a sample, as they say. It's a little worrying to me that they haven't released rules for all of the Adeptus Custodes stuff. I would have liked to have seen them do all of them. But having said that, the fact that they're doing this at all is kind of good. It's kind of a big deal. The outreach aspect of it, I'm fully behind that. It's a great idea, and I just hope they carry on with that. I hope we see the rest of the Custodes stuff being pushed out, and for them to actually ask for community feedback, because they're doing a great job at actually making an attempt to connect with their players. Stuff like this just improves on that. It shows a willingness for them to try new things. It shows a willingness for them to listen. And yeah, I'm just really happy that they're actually doing it, because I can still remember the Games Workshop of old that wouldn't tell you jack shit about anything and would just pretend that the player base didn't exist, that you bought models and then if you didn't like what you had got, you could just piss off and go somewhere else. This is a seriously good thing. We just have to hope for more. Okay, now let's talk about an interesting situation that arose during the Las Vegas Open, which has meant that Games Workshop has now pledged $5,000 to charity. I know what you're thinking, that's like a really weird like combination of things to happen, but it does sort of make sense when you know the backstory. So, essentially, that guy was at the Las Vegas Open. That guy that I've talked about how to deal with that guy was there. He was a win at all costs player, a chap called Tony, who, with his opponent, agreed to play by intent during the semi-finals. Essentially, you don't need to measure everything down to the micron. About 9 inches away is fine. That's okay. Okay, yeah, I know what you were doing there. Don't worry about measuring it out to the smallest millimetre. Playing by intent, it just speeds things up. It makes it so that the game is a bit more fluid. It's less time consuming. It's less fiddly, because you know what the other player was intending to do, and you said, okay, I see what you were going to do there. That's fine. Both players agreed to this, Tony and Alex. They said that they were going to play by intent, so it was kind of surprising that Tony took an hour for his first turn. It was surprising that he took the hour and then kind of rushed Alex a bit during Alex's first turn. And it's even more surprising when he helped Alex deep strike at the start of his movement phase. Important part there. When he helped Alex deep strike at the start of his movement phase, and then said, your movement phase is over, you've just done a deep strike. Now, that is an exceptionally shitty thing to do. I've seen quite a few people doing the, well, it was a tournament setting defence. They were playing in a tournament. They know the rules. Alex did it out of order. Yeah, I can understand that. And in fact, a judge upheld that decision. The judge said, well, you did deep strike, and deep strike is at the end of the movement phase. So, technically, yeah, you have lost your movement phase. But that kind of completely goes against the spirit of what the two players had agreed, because the two players had agreed to play by intent. And Alex was perfectly happy to let Tony do things out of order, because he knew what Tony was trying to do, and he wasn't going to quibble over mild differences that would have no impact on the final result. After all, placing your model before you move your other models doesn't really change where that model was going to go in the first place. Alex had already decided that's where he was going to deep strike. He did, and had he moved his army beforehand, he most likely still would have deep struck there anyway. There was no actual game-changing thing going on there. It wasn't a case of, I'm going to shoot this unit in the movement phase or something like that. No, it was just doing something slightly out of order, essentially to make things a little bit quicker. Tony was having none of it though. Tony decided to be that guy. He decided to take an hour for his first turn, a turn so ridiculously long that they implemented a timer for the other games. I mean, if your behaviour causes them to actually have to implement a rule so that no one else does it, you already know you're an arsehole, okay? I'll just say that right now. A lot of people were unhappy with this, understandably so, but Alex was actually an absolute... I mean, he was just pretty much a gentleman about it. He said, okay, yeah, no, I made a mistake, that's fine. He just went with it. He didn't complain, he didn't bitch, he didn't moan. He took the loss and moved on. And he did lose, he lost the game. But he just accepted it. That's what it was. Okay, that's how the rules are. No big deal. Now, that might have been the end of it. It would have just been a shitty player being shitty to a nice player. But Mark Merrill from Riot Games was watching the stream and said, wow, this Tony guy, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here. I don't think he actually said, wow, this Tony guy's an arsehole, I want to give Alex $5,000, but that's the general gist of it. He said he wanted to give Alex $5,000, and Alex, continuing to be just an all-round upstanding kind of person, said, "Thank you very much, but I'd prefer it if you donate it to charity," which happened. He also managed to persuade his employer to match that donation, so that was $10,000 going to charity, essentially because someone else was a bit of a prick, because someone else decided that they were going to go back on an agreement they've already made, and because someone decided that they were going to be that person who has to win at all costs. They want to be that guy. Now, Games Workshop has essentially rewarded Alex's sportsmanship. He has been rewarded because they have also pledged to give $5,000 to a charity of his choice. They are matching the original donation, and they are saying, because you dealt with this in a mature manner, because you were accepting of what happened, because you were a good sportsman about it, because you were actually a decent sport about the whole thing, we're going to match it. $5,000 to charity. I like this for a couple of reasons. I like it because it means that a children's hospital, I believe, is getting another $5,000. But that's nothing to ever complain about. That's a really good thing. I also like it because it's Games Workshop taking a fairly passive-aggressive but still strong stance. Essentially, if you are a good sport, you get rewarded. If you play the way you said you would play, then good things come your way. If you're not, then you will be basically held up as the anti what you should be as a Warhammer player. You will be seen to be the kind of person that no one wants to play with. That's good. There is no need for toxic arseholes in any hobby. If you agree to play a certain way, you play that way. If at the start of the game, Tony had said, we're doing this by the book, we're doing it by the rules, everything needs to be exactly in order, and then Alex had made that mistake, fair play. Fair play. Call it out. You've agreed beforehand. Everything's got to be absolutely just 100%. If you've already agreed to not do that, if you've already agreed that this is going to be a relatively relaxed game, if you've already agreed that you're not going to push every single rule even when that has no impact on the actual flow of the game itself, and then you do that, you've just immediately crossed into being a bit of a dickhead territory. And now, as a result, Alex is known for being a good chap and for essentially raising $15,000 for charity just by being a good chap, and Tony is known as a bit of an arsehole who tried to screw someone over. There is an extra layer of satisfaction to this story, because in the very next game, Tony tried to use a stratagem, and he tried to use the stratagem at the wrong point. In fact, he mistimed the stratagem. He didn't use it when he should have used it, and so his opponent said, no, you can't do that because you've already missed it. You can't use that stratagem now. I can't remember which phase it was that it was supposed to be in, but he used it in the wrong phase. And so he didn't get to use it. And he lost. And the worst thing about that, though, satisfying though that is when Alex had that done to him, he accepted it, he took the loss, he moved on. Tony didn't. Tony complained. Tony whined. Tony tried to get it reversed. Tony was sitting there going, that's not, oh, come on, man, you're not going to do that, you're not going to do that. And fair play to the other chap, because he just said, well, you did it to Alex, so now I'm doing it to you, effectively. All round, a story that warms the heart. Charity getting money. A good guy being rewarded for being a good guy. Games Workshop actually making known their feelings about people who play in the hobby in that way. And finally, the dude who was a bit of a prick to begin with didn't go home in first place. Instead, he lost because he tried to use a stratagem out of order, and his opponent basically shafted him for it. All round, good stuff, if you ask me. Anyway, what do you reckon of all of this? The rules for the Custodes stuff from Forgeworld? Whether you think it's a good idea, whether you think it's a bad idea, do you think the rules themselves are kind of gash, and will you email Forgeworld to tell them what your findings are when you use them in games of 40k? I would hope that you will. And Games Workshop donating that money to charity. That whole thing with the Las Vegas Open. Does there need to be more regulation in terms of, should players be held to agreements they make during the games? Should games only be run purely by the rules, no deviation, even if players agree to it? I'd be interested to hear what you think, so let me know in the comments below. As always, there's the usual array of things to click all over the screen, subscribe, Patreon videos, all of that shit. Click if you like, don't click if you don't want to. I will see you for the next video. Toodaloo.